On the worst jobs of World War II, we discussed 7 examples, but remember, this was war, and there were many terrible jobs you could be assigned, or as some of our viewers pointed out in the comments of that last video, volunteer for. In this video, we're going to discuss 4 more jobs that would have sucked in World War II. Let's dive right into this with human torpedoes. Now, a human torpedo wasn't a literal human being launched into an enemy hull, and there were, in fact, many types of naval vessels which fell under the broad, if a little inexact, category of human torpedoes, with some being more dangerous than others. Some of these vessels, such as the Italian frogman's Maille or the British frogman's Chariot, and some, such as the Kriegsmarine's Marder and Biber, had more in kind with submarines, but there were some which had much more in kind with unmanned torpedoes. These were the most dangerous by far, if not suicidal. The Kriegsmarine's Neger, upon which their later model, the Marder, was based, was dangerous indeed. It was comprised of not 1 but 2 torpedoes, one in which the pilot sat and one which was the actual warhead, slung beneath the former like an under-over shotgun. Unable to dive, the pilot steered the Neger over the surface of the water and then released the bottom torpedo when he was on target. Sometimes the pilot would get caught in the explosion. Sometimes the bottom torpedo would fail to detach, propelling the pilot into death's maw, and sometimes his craft would straight up capsize when it first hit the water. Some 200 Negers were produced in 1944, and while they were used in some effect against the Allies in the Normandy landings, very few returned from deployment, and between 60 and 80% of all pilots perished. The Imperial Japanese Navy's Kaiten, on the other hand, was the kamikaze craft of the sea. Kaitens were based off Type 92 and Type 93 torpedoes, and while some early designs allowed for their pilots to bail out at the last second, this feature was eventually phased out, and pilots literally drove these vessels to their doom, albeit to not so great an effect as the torpedoes on which the Kaitens were based. While Kaitens managed to down some US Navy vessels, such as the USS Missinua and Underhill, claiming a total of some 200 Allied lives, more than 100 Imperial Japanese Navy pilots steered them to their death, and a further 15 perished in Kaiten-related training accidents. As Kaitens could only dive so deep, the submarines carrying them were limited too, and this made the submarines easy targets, resulting in many more Kaiten-related deaths. In an interview, Japanese veteran Toshiharu Konada described how he felt training as a Kaiten pilot. After arriving at the Kaiten base, I was thinking about my death for 2 or 3 days, but gradually I became calm and finally I could decide. What made me decided was the thought that Japan would not be protected without changing myself into a bullet. Keeping to a maritime theme, sailing in a merchant navy was another of World War II's more dangerous jobs. Merchant navies are merchant fleets registered to specific countries, and the crewmen of merchant fleets, such as the US Merchant Fleet Marines, are, to this day, considered civilians in times of peace and military personnel in times of war. While the US Merchant Marines, Canadian Merchant Navy, New Zealand Merchant Navy, and other merchant navies served in World War II, the British Merchant Navy was the largest, with some 185,000 seamen in its collective hull. Of these, up to 37,000 were killed in enemy attacks, while a further 10,000 were wounded or taken as POWs. The death rate of merchant navy crewmen was between 25 and 27%, higher than any other branch of the British Armed Forces, and this can be attributed to the cargo which the fleet was carrying. Without merchant navies, belligerents like Britain would have fallen short of raw materials, fuel, weapons and ammunition, food, and other essential wartime resources, and these fleets were often poorly defended, lacking both the firepower and shielding to repel and absorb enemy attacks. This combination made them pretty juicy targets, especially for German U-boats and aircraft. US merchant mariner Spud Campbell described the sinking of the Liberty ship SS Henry Bacon after it was hit by a torpedo launched by a German aircraft on the 23rd of February 1945. The ship was mortally wounded, and the captain realized that. He started giving orders about launching lifeboats.